Chapter 1. In the beginning. A long time ago, before the world existed, there was only darkness. No light, no land, no sky, just emptiness. But then, something incredible happened. God spoke. "Let there be light," he said. And suddenly, light appeared, bright and shining. The darkness was no longer alone. God separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness night. It was the first day. The next day, God created the sky, wide and endless, stretching above the waters. The sky was beautiful and blue. This was the second day. On the third day, God gathered the waters into seas and made dry land appear. He called the dry land earth, and the waters seas. Then he made plants of every kind, tall trees, colorful flowers, and green grass. The earth was full of life. On the fourth day, God created the sun to shine during the day and the moon and stars to glow at night. The sun was warm and bright, and the moon shone softly in the dark sky. The fifth day was special. God filled the sky with birds, eagles, doves, and sparrows. He filled the seas with fish, big and small, swimming through the deep waters. Everything was alive and moving. Then came the sixth day. God created animals to walk on the earth: lions, elephants, horses, and tiny ants. But his greatest creation was still to come. He made humans, a man and a woman, in his own image. He gave them life and blessed them, telling them to care for the world. Finally, on the seventh day, God rested. He saw everything he had made, and it was very good. The world was full of beauty and life. This was the beginning of everything. Chapter 2. A beautiful garden. After creating the world, God made a special place. It was called the Garden of Eden. This garden was beautiful and full of life. The trees were tall and strong. Their leaves were green and fresh. There were flowers of every color, filling the air with a sweet smell. Rivers flowed gently, making the land rich and healthy. The sun shone warmly, and the birds sang happily in the trees. In the middle of the garden, God placed two special trees. One was the tree of life. The other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Then God made the first man. His name was Adam. God took dust from the ground, shaped it, and breathed life into him. Adam opened his eyes and saw the beautiful world around him. God gave him the garden to live in and take care of. Adam named the animals: lions, elephants, birds, and even tiny insects. But there was no one like him. He was alone. God saw this and said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper for him." So while Adam was sleeping, God took one of his ribs and made a woman. Her name was Eve. When Adam saw her, he was happy. Now he was not alone. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Take care of the earth and everything in it." Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden, where everything was perfect. They walked with God, and they had everything they needed. But in the garden there was also a test, a choice. Would they listen to God, or would they choose their own way? Chapter 3. The Test in the Garden. Adam and Eve lived happily in the Garden of Eden. They had everything they needed. The fruit was sweet, the air was fresh, and they walked with God every day. But God had given them one rule. You may eat from any tree in the garden, he said, but do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you eat from it, you will surely die. Adam and Eve listened. They enjoyed the garden and stayed away from the forbidden tree. But one day, a serpent appeared. It was more clever than any other animal. The serpent spoke to Eve. Did God really say you cannot eat from any tree? It asked. Eve shook her head. No, we can eat from any tree, except this one. If we eat from it, we will die. The serpent smiled. You will not die, it whispered. God knows that if you eat this fruit, your eyes will be opened. You will be like God. You will know good and evil. Eve looked at the fruit. It was beautiful and looked delicious. She wanted to be wise. She reached out, took the fruit, and ate it. Then she gave some to Adam, and he ate too. At that moment, everything changed. Their eyes were opened. They realized they were naked, and they felt ashamed. They quickly took fig leaves and covered themselves. Later, they heard God walking in the garden. But instead of running to him, they hid among the trees. Adam, where are you? God called. Adam stepped forward. I was afraid, so I hid. Did you eat from the tree I told you not to eat from? God asked. Adam pointed to Eve. She gave me the fruit, and I ate it. Eve pointed to the serpent. The serpent tricked me, and I ate. God was sad. Adam and Eve had disobeyed. Because of their choice, they could no longer stay in the garden. Life would now be difficult. There would be pain and suffering. But God still loved them. Before sending them out, he made clothes for them from animal skins. Then, Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden and entered a new, unknown world. It was the first time they were truly alone. But even then, God had a plan to bring them back. Chapter 4. A New World. Adam and Eve stepped outside the Garden of Eden for the first time. The world was different. It was not like the beautiful garden they had left behind. The ground was rough, and the sun felt hotter. The trees did not grow as easily, and the rivers were not as peaceful. Life was now difficult. Adam worked hard to grow food. He dug the earth, planted seeds, and waited for them to grow. But weeds and thorns grew too, making his work painful. Eve also had challenges. When she gave birth to their first child, it was painful, but she was happy. She named him Cain. Later, she had another son, Abel. Their family was growing. As the boys grew, they became very different. Cain worked in the fields, growing crops, Abel took care of sheep. One day, Cain and Abel brought gifts to God. Abel gave his best sheep, while Cain brought some of his crops. God was pleased with Abel's offering, but not with Cain's. Cain was angry. His heart was full of jealousy. God spoke to Cain. "Why are you angry? If you do what is right, you will be accepted. But be careful, sin is waiting at your door. It wants to control you, but you must rule over it." Cain did not listen. One day, while they were in the field, Cain attacked Abel and killed him. God spoke to Cain. "Where is your brother?" Cain looked down. "I don't know," he said. "Am I my brother's keeper?" God's voice was sad. "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Cain had to leave his family. He went far away and started a new life. But his heart was full of pain and regret. Adam and Eve were heartbroken. They had lost both of their sons. One was gone, and the other was dead. But God gave them another child. His name was Seth. Through him, God's promise would continue. Even though life was hard, God never left them. He had a plan for the future. Chapter 5: The world becomes evil. Many years passed, and the world was filled with more and more people. But as the world grew, so did wickedness. People became selfish, violent, and unkind. They stopped listening to God. God saw the earth and was saddened. People had turned away from him. They hurt each other and did what was wrong. Only one man still walked with God. His name was Noah. Noah was righteous. He obeyed God and lived a good life. God looked at Noah and made a plan to save him and his family. "Noah," God said, "I am going to send a great flood to cover the earth. But you must build an ark, a great boat. Bring your family and 2 of every kind of animal inside. You will be safe." Noah listened. He did everything just as God commanded. He gathered wood and built the ark. It was huge, big enough to hold his family and all the animals. People laughed at Noah. "Why are you building a boat? There is no flood," they mocked. But Noah kept working. He trusted God. Finally, the ark was ready. Noah led the animals inside: lions, elephants, birds, and even tiny insects. His family entered too. Then the sky grew dark. Raindrops began to fall. At first, they were small, but soon the rain became heavy. The earth shook as water burst from the ground. The great flood had begun. For 40 days and 40 nights, rain covered the earth. The waters rose higher and higher, covering even the tallest mountains. Everything outside the ark was lost. But inside, Noah and his family were safe. Then one day, the rain stopped. The waters slowly began to go down. After a long time, the ark came to rest on a mountain. Noah sent out a dove to see if the land was dry. The first time, it came back. The second time, it returned with an olive leaf. The third time, it did not come back at all. The earth was dry again. Noah and his family stepped out of the ark. The world was fresh and new. Noah built an altar and thanked God. God placed a rainbow in the sky. "This is my promise," he said. "Never again will I destroy the earth with a flood." The rainbow was a sign of God's love and faithfulness. Life on earth would begin again. Chapter 6. A fresh start. The flood was over. The world was quiet again. The sun shone brightly in the sky, and the land was fresh and clean. It was time for a new beginning. Noah and his family stepped out of the ark. They looked around at the empty land. Everything had been washed away, but God had given them a second chance. Noah built an altar and gave thanks to God. He offered a sacrifice, and God was pleased. God spoke to Noah and his family. "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and take care of it." Then God made a promise. He placed a beautiful rainbow in the sky. "This is my sign," he said. "I will never again destroy the earth with a flood." The rainbow was a reminder of God's love and faithfulness. Noah's sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth began to build their families. Soon, many people spread across the land. They planted crops, raised animals, and built homes. But as time passed, some people forgot about God. They wanted to make a name for themselves. They had an idea. "Let's build a great tower," they said. "A tower so tall that it reaches the sky. Then we will be powerful, and we will not be scattered across the earth." This was not what God wanted. He had told them to fill the earth, not to stay in one place and build a tower for their own glory. God saw what they were doing. If they all spoke the same language, they could do anything. So he decided to stop them. One day, as the people were building the Tower of Babel, something strange happened. Suddenly, they could not understand each other. One worker spoke, but another could not understand him. Confusion spread everywhere. People argued, and the work stopped. Because they could no longer communicate, they separated and moved to different parts of the world. The great tower was never finished. This was how different languages began, and how people spread across the earth. God's plan was fulfilled, even when humans tried to do things their own way. Even though people made mistakes, God's love remained. He was still in control, and his plan for the world would continue. Chapter 7. A New Journey. Many years passed after the Tower of Babel. People spread across the earth, forming different nations. But many forgot about God. Then God chose a man. His name was Abram, later called Abraham. He lived in a city called Ur with his wife Sarai and his family. One day, God spoke to Abram. "Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's house. Go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Abram listened. He trusted God. Even though he did not know where he was going, he packed his things and left. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their servants and animals. They traveled far, trusting in God's promise. When they arrived in Canaan, God spoke again. "This is the land I will give to your children." Abram built an altar and worshipped God. He thanked him for his promise. But there was a problem. Abram and Sarai were old, and they had no children. How could Abram's children become a great nation? One night, God took Abram outside. "Look up at the sky," he said. "Can you count the stars? Your children will be as many as the stars in the sky." Abram believed God's promise. Even though it seemed impossible, he had faith. God gave him a new name, Abraham, meaning father of many nations. And God made a covenant, a holy promise. "I will be your God, and you will be my people." Even though Abraham did not see the full promise in his lifetime, he trusted God's plan. This was the beginning of something great. Chapter 8. The Promise Fulfilled. Abraham and Sarah had waited a long time. God had promised them a child, but many years passed, and they were still childless. They were now very old. One day, God spoke to Abraham again. "Next year, Sarah will have a son." Sarah heard this and laughed. "How can I have a child when I am so old?" she thought. But God's promises never fail. The next year, Sarah gave birth to a baby boy. They named him Isaac, which means laughter, because Sarah had laughed when she heard God's promise. Abraham and Sarah were filled with joy. Isaac was the child God had promised. Through him, God would bless many nations. But then, God tested Abraham. One day, God said, "Abraham, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love. Go to the mountain and offer him as a sacrifice." Abraham's heart was heavy, but he trusted God. He took Isaac and traveled to the mountain. Isaac carried the wood for the offering. "Father," Isaac asked, "where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" Abraham answered, "God will provide." When they reached the top, Abraham prepared the altar. Just as he was about to sacrifice Isaac, an angel called out, "Abraham, stop! Do not harm the boy. Now I know that you trust God completely." Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the bushes. God had provided a sacrifice. God blessed Abraham again. "Because you have obeyed me, I will make your descendants as many as the stars in the sky. Through your family, all nations will be blessed." Isaac lived, and God's promise continued. Abraham had trusted God, and God had kept his word. Chapter 9. A wife for Isaac. Isaac grew up to be a strong and kind man. Abraham, his father, was now very old. He wanted to find a good wife for Isaac, someone who loved God. One day, Abraham called his most trusted servant and said, "Go to my homeland. Find a wife for my son Isaac. Do not choose from the people here, but from my own family." The servant obeyed. He took 10 camels and traveled a long way to a city called Nahor. When he arrived, he stopped by a well outside the city. He prayed, "Lord, please show me the right woman for Isaac. If she gives me water and also gives water to my camels, I will know she is the one." Before he finished praying, a young woman named Rebekah came to the well. She carried a jar on her shoulder. The servant ran to her and asked, "Please, may I have some water?" Rebekah smiled and gave him a drink. Then she said, "I will also give water to your camels." The servant was amazed. This was a sign from God. He gave Rebekah gifts, gold, jewelry, and bracelets. Then he asked about her family. When he learned that she was from Abraham's relatives, he knew God had answered his prayer. Rebekah ran home to tell her family. Her brother, Laban, welcomed the servant. After hearing everything, her family agreed that Rebekah could marry Isaac. The next day, Rebekah left her home. She traveled with the servant to meet Isaac. When she saw him from a distance, she covered her face with a veil. Isaac welcomed her, and they were married. He loved her very much, and together they began their life as husband and wife. God had led them to each other. This was just the beginning of a new family that God had promised to bless. Chapter 10. 2 brothers, 2 paths. Isaac and Rebekah were blessed with twin sons, Jacob and Esau. Even before they were born, they struggled inside Rebekah's womb. She asked God why this was happening. God answered, "2 nations are in your womb. The older will serve the younger." Esau was born first. He was strong and covered with red hair. Jacob was born right after him, holding Esau's heel. As they grew, they became very different. Esau loved to hunt and spend time outdoors. Jacob preferred staying at home, thinking and learning. One day, Esau came home from hunting. He was very hungry. Jacob had made a pot of stew. Esau said, "Give me some of that stew, I'm starving." Jacob looked at him and said, "First, sell me your birthright." A birthright was very important. It meant receiving the family's greatest blessings. But Esau was so hungry, he didn't care. "What good is my birthright if I die of hunger?" Esau said. He made a deal and ate the stew. Years later, Isaac became old and blind. He wanted to bless his firstborn, Esau. But Rebekah remembered God's words. The younger would be blessed. She told Jacob, "Go to your father. Pretend to be Esau and take the blessing." Jacob hesitated. "What if my father finds out?" Rebekah helped Jacob cover his arms with goat skin, so he would feel hairy like Esau. Then Jacob went to Isaac. "Father, it's me, Esau," he said. Isaac touched Jacob's arms. "You sound like Jacob, but you feel like Esau." Then Isaac gave Jacob the blessing meant for Esau. When Esau found out, he was furious. Jacob was afraid. Rebekah told him, "Run away to my brother's house. Stay there until Esau's anger is gone." Jacob left home, beginning a journey that would change his life forever. God had a plan for him. Chapter 11. A Stairway to Heaven. Jacob was running for his life. He had taken Esau's blessing, and now his brother was furious. His mother, Rebekah, told him to go to her brother Laban's house in Haran. Jacob traveled for many days. One night, as the sun set, he lay down on the ground, using a stone as a pillow. That night, he had a dream. In his dream, he saw a stairway reaching from the earth to heaven. Angels were going up and down the stairs. At the top stood God, who spoke to him. "I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and your father Isaac. I am with you. I will give this land to you and your descendants. I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land." When Jacob woke up, he was amazed. "Surely, God is in this place," he said. He took the stone he had used as a pillow and set it up as a pillar. He poured oil over it as an offering to God and named the place Bethel, which means house of God. Jacob made a vow. "If God will be with me and take care of me, I will serve him, and this place will be God's house." With a new heart and a new purpose, Jacob continued his journey, knowing that God was with him. Chapter 12. The trickster is tricked. Jacob arrived in Haran, tired but hopeful. He found his uncle Laban and began working for him. One day, Jacob saw a beautiful young woman named Rachel. She was Laban's daughter, and Jacob loved her. "Let me marry Rachel," Jacob said to Laban. "I will work for you for 7 years in exchange for her hand." Laban agreed, and Jacob worked hard for 7 years. But because he loved Rachel, the time passed quickly. Finally, the wedding day arrived. But Laban tricked Jacob. Instead of Rachel, he gave him Leah, Rachel's older sister. Jacob didn't realize until the next morning. Jacob was angry. "Why did you trick me?" he asked. Laban replied, "In our country, the older daughter must marry first. But if you work another 7 years, you can marry Rachel too." Jacob agreed. After 7 more years, he finally married Rachel. He loved her deeply, but now he had 2 wives, and life became complicated. God blessed Leah with many children, but Rachel had none. She prayed to God, and in time, he gave her a son, Joseph. After working for Laban for 20 years, Jacob wanted to return home. But Laban did not want him to leave because Jacob had become successful. So Jacob made a plan. One night, he gathered his family and all his flocks and secretly left. Laban chased after him, but God warned Laban in a dream not to harm Jacob. When they met, Jacob and Laban made a covenant, a promise to live in peace. Jacob was finally free. But he had one more challenge ahead, meeting his brother Esau again. Chapter 13. A Brother's Forgiveness. Jacob was returning home after many years. But there was one problem: his brother Esau. The last time they had seen each other, Esau was furious. He had wanted to kill Jacob for taking his blessing. Jacob was afraid. What if Esau was still angry? What if he wanted revenge? Jacob prayed to God, "Lord, please protect me. I am afraid of Esau." As he traveled, Jacob sent messengers ahead with gifts, goats, sheep, camels, and donkeys. "Tell Esau these are from his servant Jacob," he said. He hoped Esau would accept them. That night, something amazing happened. Jacob was alone, and a man appeared. They wrestled all night until dawn. The man touched Jacob's hip, and he was injured. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the sun is rising." But Jacob held on and said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man looked at him and said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and men, and you have won." Jacob realized that he had wrestled with God himself. He called the place Peniel, meaning face of God. The next day, Jacob saw Esau coming with 400 men. He bowed down to the ground, showing respect. To his surprise, Esau ran to him and hugged him. "My brother, I have missed you," Esau said. He was not angry anymore. Instead, he had forgiven Jacob. Jacob was overjoyed. "Seeing your face is like seeing the face of God," he said. The two brothers made peace. Jacob knew that God had been with him all along. Chapter 14. A New Beginning in Canaan. Jacob and his family settled in Canaan, the land God had promised to his descendants. He had many children, and his household grew. But not everything was peaceful. One day, Jacob's daughter Dinah went to visit the women of the land. While she was there, something terrible happened. A prince named Shechem took her and treated her badly. Dinah's brothers were furious. Two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, decided to take revenge. They tricked the men of Shechem's city and later attacked them. Jacob was troubled. "You have made us enemies in this land," he said. "Now the people here will come against us." Jacob prayed, and God spoke to him. "Go to Bethel and build an altar there. I am with you." Jacob obeyed. Before leaving, he told his family, "Remove all foreign gods from among you. We must serve only the Lord." They gave him their idols and earrings, and Jacob buried them under a tree. As they traveled, God protected them. The surrounding cities did not attack them because God put fear in their hearts. When they arrived in Bethel, Jacob built an altar and worshipped God. Then, God appeared to him again. "Your name is no longer Jacob, but Israel," God said. "I will bless you and make you a great nation." Jacob's family continued their journey, but sorrow came. His wife Rachel gave birth to another son, Benjamin, but she died during childbirth. Jacob buried her and was heartbroken. Later, Jacob's father Isaac also passed away, and Esau and Jacob buried him together. Despite all the hardships, God was still with Jacob. His family was growing, and his promises were being fulfilled. Chapter 15. A Dream That Changed Everything. Jacob had many sons, but he loved Joseph the most. He gave Joseph a special robe of many colors, which made his brothers jealous. Joseph also had dreams. One night, he told his brothers, "In my dream, we were binding sheaves of grain in the field. My sheaf stood tall, and yours bowed down to mine." His brothers were angry. "Do you think you will rule over us?" they said. Joseph had another dream. "I saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to me." Even his father, Jacob, was surprised. "Will your mother and I also bow before you?" His brothers hated him even more. One day, Joseph's brothers were tending sheep far from home. Jacob sent Joseph to check on them. When they saw him coming, they said, "Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him and see what happens to his dreams." But his brother Reuben stopped them. "Let's not kill him," he said. Instead, they threw Joseph into a pit. Later, a group of traders passed by. The brothers sold Joseph to them for 20 pieces of silver. The traders took Joseph to Egypt. To hide what they had done, the brothers took Joseph's robe, dipped it in goat's blood, and showed it to their father. Jacob cried, "A wild animal must have killed my son." He was heartbroken. Meanwhile, Joseph arrived in Egypt. Though he had lost everything, God was still with him. Joseph's journey was just beginning. Chapter 16, From Slave to Leader. Joseph arrived in Egypt as a slave. He was sold to a man named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. Even though Joseph had lost everything, God was with him. Joseph worked hard, and Potiphar saw that he was trustworthy. He put Joseph in charge of his entire household. Everything Joseph touched was successful because God blessed him. But trouble came. Potiphar's wife lied about Joseph, and he was thrown into prison. Even in prison, God was still with him. The prison guard saw Joseph's honesty and put him in charge of the other prisoners. One day, two of Pharaoh's servants, the cupbearer and the baker, had dreamed. They were troubled because they didn't know what the dreams meant. Joseph said, "God can interpret dreams. Tell me what you saw." The cupbearer said, "In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches. The grapes grew, and I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup." Joseph explained, "In 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position." The baker then said, "In my dream, I had 3 baskets of bread on my head, but birds came and ate them." Joseph's face became serious. "In 3 days, Pharaoh will take your life." 3 days later, everything happened just as Joseph said. The cupbearer returned to Pharaoh's service, but the baker was executed. Before the cupbearer left, Joseph said, "Remember me when you are free. Speak to Pharaoh about me." But the cupbearer forgot about Joseph. 2 more years passed, and Joseph remained in prison. Even though he was forgotten by men, God had not forgotten him. His story was not over. Chapter 17, From Prison to Palace. 2 years had passed, and Joseph was still in prison. Then, one night, Pharaoh had 2 strange dreams. He saw 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 thin cows. In the second dream, 7 healthy heads of grain were swallowed by 7 thin, dried-up heads. Pharaoh was troubled. He called all his wise men, but no one could explain the dreams. Then the cupbearer remembered Joseph. "When I was in prison, a young Hebrew man told me the meaning of my dream." Everything happened just as he said. Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. He was brought from the prison, washed, and given clean clothes. "I heard you can interpret dreams," Pharaoh said. Joseph answered, "I cannot, but God can." Pharaoh told Joseph his dreams, and Joseph explained, "The two dreams have the same meaning. There will be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. God is warning Pharaoh so he can prepare." Pharaoh was amazed. "What should we do?" he asked. Joseph said, "Store extra food during the good years, so there will be enough during the famine." Pharaoh was impressed. "Who is wiser than this man? God is with him." He made Joseph governor of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. He gave Joseph a royal robe, a gold chain, and a chariot. Joseph was no longer a slave, he was a ruler. The 7 good years came, and Joseph stored grain in great storehouses. Then the famine began. People from all over came to Egypt to buy food, including Joseph's own brothers. They did not know they were about to meet their lost brother. Joseph's story was not over yet. Chapter 18. A Hidden Identity. The famine spread across the land, reaching even Canaan, where Joseph's father, Jacob, and his family lived. They had no food left. So Jacob told his sons, "Go to Egypt and buy grain so we may survive." Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt. When they arrived, they were taken to the governor, who controlled all the food. They bowed down before him, not knowing he was their lost brother. Joseph recognized them immediately, but they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered his dreams from long ago. His brothers were bowing before him. But instead of revealing himself, he decided to test them. "Where do you come from?" Joseph asked. "From Canaan," they answered. "We are 10 brothers. The youngest, Benjamin, is at home, and 1 brother is no longer with us." Joseph spoke harshly. "You are spies." "No, my lord," they pleaded. "We are honest men." Joseph tested them by keeping Simeon in prison and sending the others back to Canaan with grain. But he told them, "Do not return unless you bring your youngest brother." When they returned home, Jacob was afraid. "I have already lost Joseph, and now you want to take Benjamin? If something happens to him, I will die of sorrow." But the famine grew worse. Finally, Jacob allowed Benjamin to go with his brothers back to Egypt. This time, when Joseph saw Benjamin, he had to hold back his tears. He prepared a feast for them and gave Benjamin 5 times more food than the others. Still, he was not ready to reveal himself. Instead, he placed his silver cup in Benjamin's sack and accused them of stealing. His brothers were terrified. They begged Joseph, "Please do not take Benjamin. Our father will not survive without him." Joseph saw their changed hearts. He could no longer hide the truth. The time had come to reveal his identity. Chapter 19. A Tearful Reunion. Joseph could no longer hold back his emotions. Seeing his brothers' changed hearts and their love for Benjamin, he knew it was time. He sent all the Egyptian servants out of the room. Then he wept loudly and said, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers were shocked and could not say a word. "Come closer," Joseph said. "Do not be afraid." You sold me into slavery, but God sent me ahead to save lives. There have been 2 years of famine, and there will be 5 more. God put me here so that you and our family would survive." Tears filled their eyes as they realized God had turned their evil into good. Joseph hugged Benjamin and wept. Then he kissed each of his brothers and forgave them. "Go back to Canaan," Joseph told them. "Tell our father Jacob that I am alive. Bring him here to Egypt, and I will take care of all of you." Pharaoh heard about Joseph's brothers and was pleased. He sent wagons to bring Jacob and all their families to Egypt. When Jacob heard that Joseph was alive, he could not believe. But when he saw the wagons, his heart was filled with joy. "My son Joseph is alive. I must go and see him before I die," Jacob said. With great excitement, Jacob and his entire family left Canaan and traveled to Egypt. The family was finally reunited. God had been faithful all along. Chapter 20. A new home in a foreign land. Jacob and his family set out on a long journey to Egypt. He was old, but his heart was full of joy. His son Joseph was alive. On the way, Jacob stopped at Beersheba to offer sacrifices to God. That night, God spoke to him in a vision. "Jacob, do not be afraid to go to Egypt. I will go with you, and I will bring you back again." Jacob's heart was at peace. He knew God would be with him. When they arrived in Egypt, Joseph rode out in his chariot to meet his father. The moment he saw Jacob, he ran to him and wept for a long time. Jacob held his son and said, "Now I can die in peace, for I have seen your face and know that you are alive." Joseph brought his family before Pharaoh. The king welcomed them and gave them the land of Goshen, a fertile place where they could live and raise their animals. Jacob and his sons settled in Egypt. They prospered, and their families grew in number. Before Jacob died, he gathered his sons and blessed each one. He reminded them of God's promises and told them that one day their descendants would return to Canaan. After blessing them, Jacob took his last breath and died peacefully. Joseph and his brothers carried their father back to Canaan and buried him in the family tomb, as he had wished. Though Jacob's journey had ended, God's promise was still alive. Chapter 21. A lasting promise. After Jacob's death, Joseph's brothers were afraid. What if Joseph still hates us? What if he punishes us for what we did to him? They whispered among themselves. So they sent a message to Joseph, saying, "Our father told us to ask for your forgiveness. Please forgive us for the wrong we did to you." When Joseph read the message, he wept. He called his brothers and said, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You meant evil against me, but God turned it for good, so that many lives could be saved." Then Joseph spoke kindly to them and promised, "I will take care of you and your families." His brothers were no longer afraid, for they saw that Joseph's love for them was real. Joseph lived for many more years and saw his grandchildren grow. Before he died, he gathered his family and said, "One day, God will take you out of Egypt and bring you back to Canaan, the land he promised to our fathers." Then Joseph made them promise, "When God brings you back, take my bones with you." Joseph took his last breath, and the people of Egypt mourned for him. They placed his body in a coffin, waiting for the day when his family would return to Canaan. Even in death, Joseph trusted in God's promise. This was not the end of the story. God was preparing something even greater. Chapter 22. A Nation in Chains. Many years passed, and Joseph and his brothers were gone. But their descendants, the Israelites, grew in number and became strong in Egypt. A new Pharaoh came to power, one who did not remember Joseph. He saw that the Israelites were many and feared they would become too powerful. "We must control them," Pharaoh said. So he made the Israelites slaves. They worked long hours under the hot sun, building cities and carrying heavy stones. Their lives were full of suffering. But even in their pain, the Israelites prayed to God, and He heard them. Pharaoh saw that they were still growing in number. He became afraid and ordered something terrible. Every Hebrew baby boy must be thrown into the Nile River. One woman refused to let her son die. She hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she placed him in a basket and set him afloat on the river, praying that God would protect him. The baby's sister, Miriam, watched from a distance as the basket floated down the Nile. Then something incredible happened. Pharaoh's daughter saw the basket and opened it. Inside, she found the crying baby. "This must be one of the Hebrew babies," she said with kindness. She decided to adopt him and named him Moses. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, but he would one day lead his people to freedom. God had a plan. Chapter 23. The Burning Bush. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, but deep inside, he knew he was a Hebrew. One day, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Filled with anger, Moses struck the Egyptian, and the man died. Fearing Pharaoh's punishment, Moses fled to the land of Midian. In Midian, Moses started a new life. He became a shepherd and married Zipporah, the daughter of a Midianite priest. He lived in peace, but God had a greater plan for him. One day, as Moses was tending sheep near Mount Horeb, he saw something amazing, a bush that was on fire but did not burn up. Curious, Moses stepped closer. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Moses, Moses!" Moses replied, "Here I am." "Do not come any closer," the voice said. "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses trembled and covered his face. Then God said, "I have seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of slavery." Moses was shocked. "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" God answered, "I will be with you." Moses asked, "What if the people ask, 'What is his name?'" God replied, "I am who I am. Tell them, 'I am has sent me to you.'" Still, Moses was afraid. "What if they do not believe me?" God showed Moses miraculous signs. His staff turned into a snake, and his hand became leprous and was healed again. But Moses had one more excuse. "Lord, I am not a good speaker." God reassured him, "I will help you speak, and I will send your brother Aaron to help you." Finally, Moses obeyed. He left Midian and returned to Egypt, ready to confront Pharaoh. A great journey was about to begin. Chapter 24. Let my people go. Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh's palace with a message from God. Standing before the mighty ruler of Egypt, Moses declared, "The Lord, the God of Israel, says, 'Let my people go.'" Pharaoh laughed. "Who is the Lord that I should obey him? I will not let Israel go." Instead of freeing them, Pharaoh made the Israelites work even harder. Moses was discouraged. "Lord, why have you sent me? Things have only gotten worse." But God reassured him, "I will show Pharaoh my power. He will know that I am the Lord." The next time Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, Aaron threw down his staff, and it became a snake. Pharaoh's magicians did the same, but Aaron's staff swallowed theirs. Still, Pharaoh refused to listen. So God sent the 10 plagues upon Egypt. 1. Water to blood. The Nile River turned to blood, and fish died. 2. Frogs. Frogs covered the land, even in Pharaoh's palace. 3. Gnats. Swarms of tiny insects filled the air. 4. Flies. Egypt was overrun with flies. 5. Livestock disease. The Egyptians' animals became sick and died. 6. Boils. Painful sores appeared on people and animals. 7. Hail. A terrible storm of hail and fire destroyed crops. 8. Locusts. Swarms of locusts ate everything green. 9. Darkness. Thick darkness covered the land for 3 days. 10. Death of the firstborn. Every Egyptian firstborn died, from Pharaoh's son to the lowest servant's child. Each time, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He refused to let the Israelites go until the final plague. In great sorrow, Pharaoh finally called Moses and said, "Go, take your people and leave Egypt." The Israelites prepared quickly. They ate the first Passover meal, marking their doors with lamb's blood so the plague would not harm them. That very night, the Israelites, 600,000 men, plus women and children, left Egypt. God led them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. The great journey to freedom had begun. Chapter 25. Crossing to freedom. After Pharaoh finally let the Israelites go, they left Egypt and traveled toward the promised land. God led them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. But soon Pharaoh changed his mind. "Why did we let them go? We must bring them back," he shouted. He gathered his army, horses, chariots, and soldiers, and chased after the Israelites. The Israelites reached the Red Sea, but Pharaoh's army was getting closer. They were trapped. The people cried out, "Moses, why did you bring us here? We will die." Moses answered, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see God's salvation." Then God spoke to Moses, "Lift your staff over the sea." Moses obeyed, and a strong wind began to blow. Suddenly, the waters parted, and a dry path appeared in the middle of the sea. The Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground, with walls of water on both sides. Pharaoh's army followed them into the sea, but when the Israelites reached the other side, God told Moses, "Stretch out your staff again." Moses obeyed, and the waters rushed back over the Egyptians. The army was swept away, and the Israelites were finally free. The people rejoiced and sang, "The Lord has won the victory. He is our strength and our salvation." Through this miracle, God showed his mighty power and faithfulness to his people. Chapter 26. Manna from Heaven. The Israelites were free, but the journey was difficult. As they traveled through the wilderness, they became tired and hungry. "Moses, we have no food. Why did you bring us here to die?" they complained. Moses prayed, and God answered, "I will send bread from heaven." Every morning, the people will gather what they need. The next morning, when the Israelites woke up, they saw something small and white covering the ground. "What is this?" they asked. Moses said, "This is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." They called it manna, which means "what is it?" in Hebrew. God gave specific instructions: gather only what you need for the day. On the 6th day, gather twice as much, because the 7th day is holy. Some people disobeyed and kept extra manna overnight. But by morning, it was full of worms and smelled bad. However, on the 6th day, when they gathered extra, it remained fresh for the Sabbath. The Israelites ate manna every day for 40 years, until they reached the promised land. But they complained again. "Moses, we have no water." So God told Moses to strike a rock with his staff. When he did, fresh water gushed out, and the people drank. Even in the wilderness, God provided everything they needed. Chapter 27. God's Covenant with Israel. After months in the wilderness, the Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai. There, God told Moses, "I will make a covenant with my people. If they obey my words, they will be my treasured possession." The people agreed, saying, "We will do everything the Lord has spoken." Then on the 3rd day, a thick cloud covered the mountain, and there was thunder and lightning. The people trembled as God's voice spoke from the fire. God gave them the 10 Commandments. 1. You shall have no other gods before me. 2. You shall not make idols or worship them. 3. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord. 4. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 5. Honor your father and mother. 6. You shall not murder. 7. You shall not commit adultery. 8. You shall not steal. 9. You shall not lie or bear false witness. 10. You shall not covet what belongs to others. The people were afraid and said, "Moses, you speak to us. If God speaks, we will die." Moses reassured them, "Do not fear. God is showing his power, so you will trust him." Then Moses went up the mountain and stayed 40 days and 40 nights, receiving more laws and instructions from God. Meanwhile, the Israelites waited below. But their patience would not last. Chapter 28. A costly mistake. Moses was on Mount Sinai for 40 days, receiving God's laws. But the Israelites grew impatient. "Where is Moses? He has been gone too long," they said. They went to Aaron, Moses' brother, and demanded, "Make us a god to lead us." Aaron told them, "Give me your gold earrings." The people brought their gold, and Aaron melted it down and shaped it into a golden calf. Then they said, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of Egypt." The next day, they held a festival, offering sacrifices and dancing around the calf. But God saw everything. On the mountain, God told Moses, "Go down at once. The people have turned away from my commands." Moses hurried down, carrying the 2 stone tablets with the 10 commandments. When he saw the golden calf and the people dancing, he became furious. In anger, he threw down the tablets, breaking them at the foot of the mountain. Moses burned the golden calf, ground it into powder, scattered it in water, and made the Israelites drink it. Then he turned to Aaron. "What have you done?" Aaron replied, "The people forced me. I threw the gold into the fire, and out came this calf." Moses stood at the entrance of the camp and called out, "Whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me." The tribe of Levi came forward, and Moses commanded them to restore order in the camp. Many people faced judgment that day. Afterward, Moses returned to God and pleaded, "Forgive them, Lord. If not, erase my name from your book." God was merciful but said, "I will not go with this people, for they are stubborn, but I will send an angel before them." Moses begged, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us from here." God heard Moses' prayer and promised, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Though Israel had sinned, God's mercy was greater. He gave Moses a second set of stone tablets, renewing his covenant with his people. Chapter 29. A second chance. After the golden calf incident, Moses pleaded with God to forgive the Israelites. "Lord, if you do not go with us, do not send us from here." God, in his mercy, answered, "I will go with you." But he also warned, "I am making a new covenant with Israel. Obey my commands, and I will bless you." God told Moses to chisel out 2 new stone tablets like the first ones. "I will write the same words on them," he said. Moses went up Mount Sinai again, fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. God revealed his nature to Moses, saying, the Lord, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness." God renewed his covenant and gave Moses laws for Israel to follow, including, "Keep the Sabbath holy. Do not worship other gods. Celebrate the feasts as I have commanded." When Moses came down from the mountain, his face was shining with God's glory. The people were afraid to come near him, so he covered his face with a veil when speaking to them. The Israelites now understood the seriousness of God's commands. They promised to follow His laws and remain faithful to Him. Despite their failure, God gave them a second chance. Chapter 30. God's presence among His people. After renewing the covenant, God gave Moses detailed instructions for building the tabernacle, a sacred tent where He would dwell among His people. The Israelites brought offerings, gold, silver, fine linen, and precious stones, to construct it exactly as God commanded. The skilled craftsmen Bezalel and Oholiab led the work. They carefully made the Ark of the Covenant, the golden lampstand, the altar of incense, and the bronze basin for purification. Finally, the tabernacle was finished, and Moses set it up. He placed the ark inside the most holy place, covered by the mercy seat, where God's presence would dwell. Then he anointed the tabernacle and the priests with holy oil, setting them apart for service. As soon as everything was completed, a cloud covered the tabernacle, and the glory of the Lord filled it. The people stood in awe as God's presence came to dwell among them. From that moment, whenever the cloud lifted, the Israelites knew it was time to move. When the cloud remained, they stayed where they were. The journey was not over, but now they knew God was with them. Chapter 31. The journey continues. With the tabernacle completed, the Israelites were now ready to follow God wherever He led them. A cloud covered the tabernacle by day, and at night fire appeared above it. This was the sign of God's presence among them. Whenever the cloud lifted, the Israelites packed up and moved forward. Whenever it remained, they stayed in place. They did not know how long they would camp in each place. Sometimes it was a few days, sometimes many months. The Israelites learned to trust God's timing. As they traveled, God guided them through Moses. He gave them laws to live by and instructions on how to worship Him. The Levites, the tribe set apart for priestly duties, carried the Ark of the Covenant whenever they moved. But not everything went smoothly. The Israelites often complained about food, water, and the difficulty of their journey. "Why did we leave Egypt? We had plenty of food there," they grumbled. Yet, each time they doubted, God provided. He gave them manna to eat, water from the rock, and quail when they desired meat. Despite their struggles, one thing was certain: God was leading them, step by step, toward the promised land. Chapter 32. Trials and Tests. As the Israelites continued their journey, they faced many tests of faith. Though God provided for them, they often doubted and complained. One day, they arrived at a place with no water. The people quarreled with Moses, saying, "Why did you bring us here to die?" Moses cried out to God, and the Lord told him, "Speak to the rock, and water will flow from it." But Moses, frustrated with the people, struck the rock twice instead of speaking to it. Water still came out, but God told Moses, "Because you did not trust me enough, you will not enter the promised land." Later, as they traveled, the people grew impatient and spoke against God and Moses. Suddenly, venomous snakes appeared and bit many of them. The people cried out, "We have sinned. Pray for us." God told Moses to make a bronze snake and set it on a pole. "Whoever looks at it will live." Those who obeyed were healed. Through each trial, God was teaching the Israelites to trust Him completely. The promised land was near, but first, they had to learn to follow God with all their hearts. Chapter 33. The 12 Spies Report. The Israelites traveled through the wilderness for a long time. Finally, they reached the land God had promised them, Canaan. God told Moses, "Send 12 men to explore the land." So, 12 spies went to Canaan. They saw green fields, big trees, and strong cities. They also found huge grapes, so big that 2 men had to carry them on a pole. After 40 days, the spies returned. "The land is beautiful," they said. "But the people, they are big and strong. Their cities have high walls." Caleb and Joshua, 2 of the spies, said, "We can take this land. God is with us." But the other 10 spies were afraid. "No, the people there are like giants. We are small like grasshoppers." The Israelites became afraid. They cried and wanted to go back to Egypt. They did not trust God's promise. God was not happy. "Because you do not believe me," He said, "you will stay in the wilderness for 40 years. Only Joshua and Caleb will enter the land." Even when people doubt, God's promises never fail. He always keeps His word. Chapter 34. The woman who hid the spies. The Israelites were preparing to enter the promised land. But before they could cross the Jordan River, Joshua sent 2 spies to scout the city of Jericho. The spies entered the city and found refuge in the house of Rahab, a woman who lived near the city wall. When the king of Jericho heard about the spies, he sent soldiers to capture them. But Rahab hid the men on her rooftop under stalks of flax. She whispered to them, "I know that the Lord has given you this land. Everyone here is afraid because we have heard how He parted the Red Sea and defeated mighty kings for you. Please, swear to me that when you take this city, you will save me and my family." The spies agreed. "Tie a scarlet cord in your window. When we come back, everyone inside your house will be safe." That night, Rahab helped the spies escape by lowering them down the city wall with a rope. The spies returned to Joshua and reported, "The Lord has surely given this land into our hands. The people of Jericho are terrified of us." Rahab's faith saved her and her family. She believed in the power of God even before she saw his miracles. Chapter 35. Nearing the Promise. After many years of wandering in the wilderness, the Israelites finally approached the Promised Land. But before entering, God gave them final instructions. Moses reminded the people of everything God had done. "Remember how the Lord led you, provided for you, and tested you. Trust him, and you will be blessed in the land he is giving you." However, Moses also warned them, "If you turn away from God and worship other gods, you will be driven out of this land." Then God told Moses, "Your time is near. You will not enter the Promised Land, but you will see it from a distance." Moses climbed to the top of Mount Nebo and looked out over Canaan. There, God showed him the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. After blessing the people one last time, Moses passed away, and God himself buried him in an unknown place. The Israelites mourned for 30 days. Then God chose Joshua to lead them into the land. "Be strong and courageous," God told Joshua. "I will be with you as I was with Moses." The journey through the wilderness had come to an end, and a new chapter was about to begin. Chapter 36. A New Beginning. After Moses' passing, Joshua became the new leader of Israel. God spoke to him, saying, "Be strong and courageous, for I will be with you as I was with Moses." The Israelites stood at the edge of the Jordan River, ready to enter the Promised Land. But the river was overflowing. How would they cross? God told Joshua, "Tell the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant into the river. When they step in, the waters will stop flowing." In faith, the priests stepped into the Jordan, and immediately the waters stopped. The Israelites crossed on dry ground, just as their ancestors had crossed the Red Sea. After they reached the other side, Joshua commanded, "Take 12 stones from the river and set them up as a memorial. This will remind future generations of what God has done." The Israelites rejoiced. They had finally entered the land God had promised to their forefathers. But their journey was not over. Ahead of them stood Jericho, a great city with mighty walls. They would soon face their first battle in the Promised Land. God had led them this far, and He would not fail them now. Chapter 37. Victory through faith. After crossing the Jordan River, the Israelites camped near Jericho, a strong city with high walls. Joshua sent 2 spies to explore the city. They stayed in the house of Rahab, a woman who believed in the God of Israel. She hid them and said, "I know the Lord has given you this land." Because of her faith, she and her family would be saved. God gave Joshua an unusual battle plan. March around the city once a day for 6 days. On the 7th day, march 7 times. Then have the priests blow their trumpets and the people shout. The Israelites obeyed. For 6 days, they marched in silence. On the 7th day, they marched 7 times. Then the trumpets sounded, and the people shouted with all their might. Suddenly, the walls of Jericho collapsed. The Israelites rushed in and took the city just as God had promised. Rahab and her family were spared, and she later became part of the lineage of Jesus. This victory was not because of strength, but because of faith and obedience. God had given them the land, and He would continue to lead them. Chapter 38. The Battles for Canaan. After the victory at Jericho, the Israelites continued their conquest of the Promised Land. But their next battle at Ai did not go as planned. They were defeated because one man, Achan, had disobeyed God by taking forbidden treasure from Jericho. When Joshua sought God's guidance, the Lord revealed Achan's sin. Achan confessed, and after justice was carried out, Israel fought again. This time, they won. They learned that obedience was the key to victory. The Israelites then faced a new challenge. The Gibeonites, afraid of Israel's power, tricked them into making a peace treaty by pretending to be from a far-off land. Joshua and the leaders did not ask God first, and they were deceived. But because they had made a promise, they honored it. Later, 5 Canaanite kings gathered to fight against Gibeon, and the Israelites went to help. In this great battle, God fought for Israel. As the enemy fled, Joshua prayed, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon." Miraculously, the sun stopped in the sky until Israel won the battle. Through many battles, Israel conquered city after city. But the victories were not because of their strength. It was God who gave them the land. Chapter 39. Ruth's Journey of Faith. A long time ago, there was a woman named Naomi. She lived in Bethlehem, but a great famine came, so she and her family moved to Moab. In Moab, Naomi's husband died. Later, her 2 sons also died, leaving Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law alone. Naomi felt very sad. "I will go back to Bethlehem," Naomi said. "You should stay in Moab and find new husbands." One daughter-in-law stayed, But Ruth, the other one, said, I will not leave you. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Ruth and Naomi traveled to Bethlehem. They had no money, so Ruth went to the fields to gather leftover grain. She worked hard under the hot sun. A kind man named Boaz owned the field. He saw Ruth and said, She is a good woman. Let her gather grain safely. Later, Boaz married Ruth, and they had a son named Obed. Many years later, Obed's grandson was King David. God blessed Ruth for her kindness and faith. Even though she was from another land, she became part of God's great plan. Chapter 40. Inheriting God's Promise. After years of battles, the land of Canaan was now under Israel's control. But there was still much to do. Each tribe needed to receive its inheritance. Joshua gathered the Israelites and divided the land among the 12 tribes as God had commanded. Judah received land in the south, including Jerusalem. Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's sons, were given large portions in the central region. Benjamin, Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan each received their share. Levi was not given land, but was assigned cities, because they were set apart for God's service. Among them, Caleb, one of the faithful spies, came forward and reminded Joshua, God promised me this land because I remained faithful. Joshua blessed him, and Caleb took possession of Hebron, defeating the giants who lived there. After all the land was distributed, the Israelites built the tabernacle in Shiloh, making it their center of worship. Then, God gave the people cities of refuge, places where someone who accidentally caused harm could find safety. Finally, when all was done, Joshua gathered the people and reminded them, God has fulfilled his promise. Serve him faithfully, and you will prosper. The land was now theirs, but their faithfulness to God would determine their future.
Chapter 41. Inheriting God's Promise. As Joshua grew old, he gathered all the Israelites at Shechem to remind them of everything God had done for them. The Lord has fought for you, Joshua said. He gave you this land, just as he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then, he gave them a choice: fear the Lord and serve him alone, or follow the gods of the nations around you. With great unity, the Israelites responded, We will serve the Lord. To mark this commitment, Joshua set up a stone monument under an oak tree near the tabernacle, saying, This stone will be a witness against us, that we have chosen to follow the Lord. After this, Joshua passed away at the age of 110 years, and Israel continued to serve the Lord during the lifetime of those who had witnessed his great works. But as time passed, a new generation arose that did not remember the Lord. They began to turn away, leading to a time of struggle and hardship. The land had been given to them, but their faithfulness to God would determine their future. The time of the judges. Chapter 42. A cycle of faith and failure. After Joshua's death, a new generation of Israelites arose, one that did not remember the Lord or his mighty works. They turned away from God and worshipped the idols of the surrounding nations. Because of their disobedience, God allowed foreign nations to oppress them. The Israelites suffered greatly and cried out to the Lord for help. In His mercy, God raised up judges, leaders who delivered Israel from their enemies. These judges were not kings, but chosen by God to rescue His people and lead them back to Him. Some of these judges included Othniel, a mighty warrior who brought peace for 40 years. Deborah, a wise prophetess who led Israel to victory. Gideon, a man who defeated a vast army with only 300 soldiers. Samson, a strong man who fought the Philistines but struggled with personal weakness. But each time a judge died, the people turned away from God again, falling back into sin. This became a cycle of faith and failure. 1. The Israelites turned away from God. 2. Enemies oppressed them. 3. They cried out to God. 4. God sent a judge to save them. 5. Peace lasted for a time, until they turned away again. Despite their unfaithfulness, God never abandoned them. He was always ready to rescue them when they repented and turned back to Him. Samson, the strong judge. Chapter 43. Strength and weakness. Among the judges God raised up, one stood out for his incredible strength, Samson. Before his birth, an angel told his parents, "Your son will begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines." As a sign of his dedication to God, Samson was never to cut his hair. Samson grew into a mighty warrior, known for his great feats of strength. He tore apart a lion with his bare hands. He defeated 1,000 Philistines with a donkey's jawbone. He carried the gates of a city on his shoulders. But despite his strength, Samson had a weakness: his love for Delilah, a woman who tricked him. The Philistines bribed her to find the secret of his strength. After much persistence, Samson told her, "If my hair is cut, I will be as weak as any other man." That night, Delilah had his hair shaved while he slept. The Philistines captured Samson, gouged out his eyes, and imprisoned him. In his final moments, Samson prayed, "Lord, remember me. Give me strength one more time." He was brought to a great Philistine temple, where thousands had gathered to mock him. With one last surge of power, he pushed against the pillars, collapsing the temple and defeating more enemies in his death than in his life. Samson's story showed that God can use even the weak and broken for His purpose. Israel demands a king. Chapter 44. The end of the judges. After Samson's death, Israel continued to struggle with faithfulness. The people desired a strong leader like the nations around them. Instead of trusting God as their king, they cried out, "Give us a king to rule over us." The prophet Samuel, who was both a judge and a priest, was saddened. He warned them, "A king will take your sons for his army and your daughters for his servants. He will tax you heavily. Are you sure this is what you want?" But the people insisted, "We want to be like other nations." God allowed their request and chose Saul, a tall and strong man from the tribe of Benjamin. Samuel anointed him, saying, "You will be the first king of Israel." At first, Saul led well, but soon his pride and disobedience led to his downfall. Instead of waiting for Samuel to offer a sacrifice, Saul did it himself, disobeying God's command. Later, he refused to fully obey God's instructions in battle. Because of this, God rejected Saul as king and told Samuel to anoint a new king, David, a humble shepherd boy. This marked a great transition in Israel's history. No longer would they be ruled by judges, instead, they would be led by kings. Would they find success, or would they still turn away from God? David, the Shepherd King. Chapter 45. A king after God's heart. After rejecting Saul as king, God sent the prophet Samuel to the house of Jesse in Bethlehem. There, he would anoint Israel's next king. Jesse presented his strong and tall sons, but God told Samuel, "Do not look at outward appearance. Man looks at the outside, but the Lord looks at the heart." Samuel asked if there were any more sons. Jesse hesitated and then said, "There is one more, but he is just a shepherd boy." That boy was David, the youngest son, out in the fields tending sheep. When he arrived, God spoke to Samuel, "This is the one, anoint him." From that day, the Spirit of the Lord was with David. But he did not become king immediately. First, he had to face many challenges. David played the harp to soothe King Saul, who was tormented by an evil spirit. He defeated Goliath, the giant warrior of the Philistines, with just a sling and a stone. Saul became jealous of David's success and tried to kill him multiple times. David fled and lived in caves, trusting in God's timing. Even when David had the chance to kill Saul, he refused, saying, "I will not harm the Lord's anointed." He chose patience and faith instead of revenge. David's journey showed that true leadership is not about power but a heart that follows God. His time to rule would come, but only in God's perfect timing. David becomes king. Chapter 46. The rise of a righteous king. After years of trials and waiting, the time finally came for David to take the throne. When Saul and his sons died in battle, the people of Judah anointed David as their king. However, Israel was divided. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, ruled over the rest of the tribes. For 7 years, there was conflict between David's house and Saul's supporters. But God was with David, and he grew stronger while Saul's house weakened. Finally, the leaders of all Israel came to David and said, "You have led us before, even when Saul was king. Now be our king." David made a covenant with them, and they anointed him king over all Israel. His first act as king was to capture Jerusalem and make it his capital. He also brought the Ark of the Covenant to the city, establishing it as the center of worship. David sought to rule with justice and honor. Though he was a great warrior, he knew his success came from God. "The Lord is my shepherd," he would later write in his Psalms. David's reign was marked by victories, prosperity, and worship. Yet, his greatest challenges were still ahead. Chapter 47. A King's Failure and Repentance. David had been a great king, but even the strongest fall when they turned from God's ways. His greatest test came not on the battlefield, but within his own heart. One evening, David saw Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, a faithful soldier. Overcome by temptation, David took her as his own, and later arranged for Uriah to be sent to the front lines of battle, where he was killed. God was displeased and sent the prophet Nathan to confront David. "You are the man," Nathan declared, telling a parable of a rich man who stole a poor man's lamb. David, realizing his sin, fell to the ground and cried, "I have sinned against the Lord." David repented deeply, writing Psalm 51, a heartfelt plea for mercy, "Create in me a clean heart, O God." Though forgiven, David faced consequences, his household experienced turmoil, and his kingdom suffered unrest. Despite his failure, David remained a man after God's heart. He accepted God's discipline and continued to trust in Him. Through repentance, he found restoration. David's story reminds us that even the greatest leaders need God's grace. Chapter 48. Warnings and Hope from the Prophets. A long time ago, God's people forgot Him. They disobeyed His laws and worshipped idols. So, God sent prophets to warn them. Two of these prophets were Isaiah and Jeremiah. Isaiah was a prophet in Judah. He warned the people, "Turn back to God. If you do not, your land will be destroyed." But he also gave them hope. He told them that one day, a Savior would come. "A child will be born, and he will be called Emmanuel," Isaiah said. God is with us. Isaiah also spoke about a suffering servant. He said this servant would take the punishment for people's sins. Many years later, this prophecy came true. Jesus died for the sins of the world. Jeremiah was called the weeping prophet because he was very sad. He told the people, "God is sending Babylon to destroy Jerusalem, because you will not listen." But they ignored him. Soon, the Babylonians came, burned the city, and took the people away. Even in sorrow, Jeremiah gave a message of hope. God will bring you back one day. He will make a new promise with you. He will write His law on your hearts, and you will be His people. Both prophets showed that God is holy, but He is also loving. He punishes sin, but He always has a plan to save His people. The call of His Chapter 49. A prophet among exiles. Ezekiel was a young man when the Babylonians took him and many others away from Jerusalem. They became captives in Babylon. One day, as Ezekiel sat by a river, he saw something amazing, a vision from God. He saw a bright light, a great storm, and 4 heavenly creatures. Above them was a shining throne, and on the throne was the glory of God. Then, Ezekiel heard God's voice. Ezekiel, I am sending you to my people. They have turned away from me, but you must speak my words to them. God gave Ezekiel a scroll and told him to eat it. The scroll tasted sweet like honey. God said, my words will fill you. Now, go and tell the people. Ezekiel warned the Israelites, turn back to God. If you do not, Jerusalem will be destroyed. But they did not listen. Soon, Babylon burned the city and took more people away. Even in sorrow, God gave Ezekiel hope. One day, God showed him a valley full of dry bones. Can these bones live? God asked. Ezekiel answered, Lord, only you know. God said, speak to the bones. As Ezekiel obeyed, the bones came together, grew flesh, and came back to life. God said, just as I give life to these bones, I will bring my people back. I will give them new hearts and my spirit, so they will follow me. Even in dark times, God promised to restore his people. Chapter 50. Trusting God in Suffering. A long time ago, in a faraway land, there lived a man named Job. He was a good and honest man who loved God with all his heart. He always did what was right and stayed away from evil. Job had a big family, many animals, a happy life. But one day, everything changed. One day, Satan came before God and said, Job only follows you because you have blessed him. If you take everything away, he will turn away from you. God knew that Job's faith was strong, so he allowed Satan to test him. In just one day, Job lost everything. His animals were stolen. His servants were killed. A storm destroyed his home, and his children died. Job himself became very sick, covered in painful sores. But even in his pain, Job did not turn away from God. Instead, he said, The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. 3 of Job's friends came to visit him. At first, they just sat with him in silence for 7 days. Then they began to speak. Job, you must have done something wrong. God must be punishing you. But Job knew he had not sinned. He cried out to God, Why is this happening to me? Job did not understand his suffering, but he still trusted God. Finally, after a long time, God spoke to Job from a storm. Where were you when I created the earth? Can you command the stars? Do you understand my ways? Job humbled himself and said, Lord, I spoke of things I did not understand. You are great, and I trust you. Because Job remained faithful, God blessed him again. He gave Job twice as many animals as before. He gave him more wealth. He gave Job new children. Job lived a long and happy life. Job's story teaches us, even when life is hard, we can trust God. God's plans are greater than we can understand. In the end, God rewards those who stay faithful. Job's story reminds us that God is always in control, even in our hardest moments. Chapter 51. The Divided Kingdom. Despite his wisdom, Solomon's heart turned away from God in his later years. He married many foreign wives who worshipped idols, and soon, Solomon himself began to build temples for these false gods. The Lord warned him, "If you turn away and worship other gods, I will tear the kingdom away from you." But Solomon did not listen, and his disobedience had consequences. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam became king. The people came to him, saying, "Lighten the heavy taxes and labor that your father placed on us." But instead of listening to wise counsel, Rehoboam followed the advice of his young friends and made life even harder for the people. As a result, the kingdom split in two. Jeroboam became king of the northern kingdom, Israel. Rehoboam remained king of the southern kingdom, Judah. Jeroboam led Israel into idolatry, making golden calves and saying, "These are your gods, O Israel." This sin led the people further away from God, and the nation fell into darkness. The division of the kingdom was a turning point. What was once a united nation under David and Solomon was now broken. Yet, even in judgment, God's plan was still unfolding. Chapter 52. A call back to God. As Israel continued in idolatry, God sent the prophet Elijah to call the people back to him. The most wicked king of all, Ahab, ruled over Israel, and his wife Jezebel led the nation into deep idol worship, serving Baal and other false gods. Elijah stood before King Ahab and declared, "There will be no rain in Israel until the Lord commands it." A great famine came upon the land for 3 years. During this time, God provided for Elijah in miraculous ways. He sent ravens to bring him food. A widow's oil and flour never ran out during the famine. He raised the widow's son from the dead. But Elijah's greatest test came on Mount Carmel. He challenged the prophets of Baal, saying, "If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The prophets of Baal built an altar and called upon their God all day. But nothing happened. Then, Elijah rebuilt the altar of the Lord, poured water over it, and prayed. Fire fell from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the altar, and even the water. The people fell on their faces, crying, "The Lord, He is God." After this victory, Elijah prayed, and rain finally returned to the land. Yet, despite his triumph, Jezebel sought to kill him, and Elijah fled into the wilderness, feeling alone. But God whispered to him in a gentle breeze, reminding him that He was always with him. Elijah's story teaches us that even in times of darkness, God remains faithful and calls His people back to Him. Chapter 53. A double portion of the Spirit. After Elijah's powerful ministry, God chose Elisha to continue his work. As Elijah's time on earth was coming to an end, Elisha followed him closely, refusing to leave his side. Elijah asked, "What do you want me to do for you before I am taken away?" Elisha boldly replied, "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Elijah said, "If you see me when I am taken, you will receive it." Suddenly, a chariot of fire appeared, and Elijah was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw it and cried out, "My father, my father." Then, Elijah was gone, and his mantle fell to the ground. Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak and struck the Jordan River. The waters parted, just as they had for Elijah. The other prophets saw this and declared, "The spirit of Elijah now rests on Elisha." Elisha went on to perform many miracles, showing that God was still working through him. He purified poisoned water and made it safe to drink. He helped a widow's oil multiply so she could pay her debts. He healed Naaman, a commander, from leprosy. He caused an iron axe head to float on water. Elisha's ministry proved that God's power was not just in one man. It was passed down to those who faithfully followed him. Chapter 54. Jonah and the Great Fish. Jonah was a prophet. One day, God spoke to him, "Go to Nineveh and tell the people to stop doing evil." But Jonah did not want to go. "The people of Nineveh are our enemies. I do not want them to be saved." So, Jonah ran away. He got on a ship and sailed in the opposite direction. Suddenly, a great storm came. The wind howled, and the waves crashed against the ship. The sailors were afraid. "Pray to your gods," they cried. But Jonah knew the truth. "This storm is because of me. Throw me into the sea, and it will stop." The sailors did not want to, but the storm got worse. So, they threw Jonah into the sea. At once, the storm stopped. Then, something amazing happened. A great fish came and swallowed Jonah. Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. In the darkness, Jonah prayed, "God, I am sorry. I will do what you ask." God heard Jonah's prayer. The fish swam to the shore and spit him out. This time, Jonah obeyed. He went to Nineveh and warned the people, "In 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed." The people believed Jonah's words. They stopped doing evil and prayed to God. So, God forgave them. But Jonah was angry. "They do not deserve to be saved," he complained. God answered, "I love all people. Should I not care for them too?" Jonah's story teaches us that God's mercy is for everyone. Chapter 55. Hosea, the prophet of faithful love. A long time ago, there was a prophet named Hosea. God gave him a difficult mission, to show Israel how much God loved them, even when they turned away from him. God told Hosea to marry a woman named Gomer, who would be unfaithful to him. This was to be a picture of how Israel had been unfaithful to God by worshiping other gods. At first, Hosea and Gomer were happy together. They had children, and Hosea loved her deeply. But soon, Gomer left him, running after other men. She forgot about Hosea's love, just as Israel had forgotten God. Even though Gomer had betrayed him, God told Hosea to find her and bring her back. Hosea searched for Gomer and finally found her in a terrible situation. She had been abandoned and was about to be sold as a slave. Hosea paid a price to bring her home, just as God was willing to pay a price to bring his people back to him. Hosea forgave Gomer and loved her again, just as God forgave Israel and called them back to him. Hosea's message to Israel. Through Hosea, God spoke to Israel. I will heal your unfaithfulness and love you freely. Even though Israel had turned away, God promised that his love would never fail. He longed for his people to return to him. Hosea's life was a living example of God's faithful love. Even when his people sinned, God never stopped loving them. He was always ready to forgive and bring them back. This story reminds us that God's love is stronger than our mistakes. He calls us to return to him, no matter how far we have wandered. Chapter 56. Warnings and Hope from the Prophets. A long time ago, God's people forgot him. They disobeyed his laws and worshipped idols. So, God sent prophets to warn them. Two of these prophets were Isaiah and Jeremiah. Isaiah was a prophet in Judah. He warned the people, "Turn back to God. If you do not, your land will be destroyed." But he also gave them hope. He told them that one day, a Savior would come. A child will be born, and he will be called Emmanuel, Isaiah said. God is with us. Isaiah also spoke about a suffering servant. He said this servant would take the punishment for people's sins. Many years later, this prophecy came true. Jesus died for the sins of the world. Jeremiah was called the weeping prophet because he was very sad. He told the people, "God is sending Babylon to destroy Jerusalem because you will not listen." But they ignored him. Soon, the Babylonians came, burned the city, and took the people away. Even in sorrow, Jeremiah gave a message of hope. God will bring you back one day. He will make a new promise with you. He will write his law on your hearts, and you will be his people. Both prophets showed that God is holy, but he is also loving. He punishes sin, but he always has a plan to save his people. Chapter 57. The Fall of Israel. Despite the warnings of many prophets, the kingdom of Israel continued in its idolatry and disobedience. They turned away from the Lord, worshipped idols, and followed the practices of the surrounding nations. God sent prophet after prophet, calling them to repent. "Return to me," he pleaded through men like Elijah, Elisha, Amos, and Hosea. But the people refused to listen. They hardened their hearts and grew more rebellious. Finally, God allowed the Assyrians to come against Israel. Samaria, the capital, was besieged. After a long and desperate struggle, the city fell, and the kingdom of Israel was destroyed. The Assyrians captured the people, scattering them throughout their empire. They brought foreigners into the land of Israel, creating a mix of people who would later be known as the Samaritans. The northern kingdom of Israel was no more. Yet, even in this judgment, God's promise was not broken. He had said that through David's line, a Savior would come. Though Israel had fallen, God's plan of redemption was still in motion. Chapter 58. The End of the Kingdom. After Israel's fall, the southern kingdom of Judah remained, ruled by kings from David's line. Some kings, like Hezekiah and Josiah, sought the Lord and led the people in reform. But most of Judah's rulers turned away from God, following idols and oppressing their own people. The prophets, including Jeremiah and Isaiah, pleaded with the nation to repent. Jeremiah warned, "If you do not listen, the temple will be destroyed, and you will go into exile." Yet the people refused to turn back. Finally, the time of judgment came. The Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Jerusalem. The city walls were broken down, the temple was burned, and the people of Judah were carried into Babylonian captivity. The land was left desolate, and only a remnant of the poor remained. Judah, the once proud kingdom of God's people, was no more. But even in exile, God's promise was not forgotten. Through Jeremiah, God said, "I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Though the kingdom had fallen, God's plan of redemption continued. The line of David remained, and God would one day send the Savior. Chapter 59. A Prophet Among Exiles. Ezekiel was a young man when the Babylonians took him and many others away from Jerusalem. They became captives in Babylon. One day, as Ezekiel sat by a river, he saw something amazing. A vision from God. He saw a bright light, a great storm, and 4 heavenly creatures. Above them was a shining throne, and on the throne was the glory of God. Then, Ezekiel heard God's voice. "Ezekiel, I am sending you to my people. They have turned away from me, but you must speak my words to them." God gave Ezekiel a scroll and told him to eat it. The scroll tasted sweet like honey. God said, "My words will fill you. Now, go and tell the people." Ezekiel warned the Israelites, "Turn back to God. If you do not, Jerusalem will be destroyed." But they did not listen. Soon, Babylon burned the city and took more people away. Even in sorrow, God gave Ezekiel hope. One day, God showed him a valley full of dry bones. "Can these bones live?" God asked. Ezekiel answered, Lord, only you know. God said, Speak to the bones. As Ezekiel obeyed, the bones came together, grew flesh, and came back to life. God said, Just as I give life to these bones, I will bring my people back. I will give them new hearts and my spirit, so they will follow me. Even in dark times, God promised to restore his people. Chapter 60. Daniel's faith in the lion's den. Daniel was a wise and faithful man. Even though he lived in Babylon, far from his home, he always prayed to God. The king of Babylon liked Daniel and gave him an important job. But some jealous men wanted to get rid of him. They tricked the king into making a new law. Anyone who prays to another god will be thrown into the lion's den. Daniel heard about the law, but he did not stop praying. Every day, he knelt by his window and prayed to God, just as he always did. The jealous men saw this and told the king. The king was sad because he liked Daniel, but he could not change the law. So, Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. That night, the king could not sleep. In the morning, he ran to the den and called out, Daniel, has your God saved you? Daniel answered, Yes. God sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths. They did not hurt me because I have done no wrong. The king was overjoyed and ordered Daniel to be taken out. Then, he made a new law: everyone must worship the God of Daniel, for he is the living God. Daniel's story shows us that God protects those who trust in him. Chapter 61. Esther's Courage. A long time ago, in the kingdom of Persia, there was a young Jewish girl named Esther. She was kind and beautiful. One day, the king of Persia needed a new queen, and Esther was chosen. But she kept her Jewish identity a secret. Esther had a wise cousin named Mordecai. He told her, Never forget that you are one of God's people. At that time, there was a wicked man named Haman. He was an official in the king's court, but he hated the Jews. He made an evil plan and convinced the king to sign a law. All the Jews must be destroyed. When Mordecai heard this, he sent a message to Esther. You must help our people. Perhaps God made you queen for this very moment. Esther was afraid. If I go to the king without being invited, I could be killed, she said. But she prayed and fasted for 3 days. Then, with courage, she went before the king. The king saw Esther and smiled. What do you want, my queen? He asked. Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, she revealed Haman's evil plan. My people are in danger, she said. The king was furious. Who would do such a thing? Esther pointed to Haman. This wicked man. Haman was punished, and the Jews were saved. The people celebrated, and a new holiday, Purim, was established to remember how God saved them. Esther's bravery teaches us that God can use anyone for His great plan. Chapter 62. Return to Jerusalem. After 70 years in Babylonian captivity, God's promise began to unfold. King Cyrus of Persia, who conquered Babylon, made a decree. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He has charged me to build him a temple in Jerusalem. Let his people return and rebuild. A remnant of exiles returned to Jerusalem under the leadership of Zerubbabel, and later Ezra the scribe. They faced opposition from enemies who tried to stop the rebuilding. But God encouraged them through the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. Together, they laid the foundation of the second temple and celebrated with joy. Though the new temple was not as magnificent as the first, the people worshipped with humble hearts, knowing that God's presence was with them. Ezra also led a spiritual renewal, calling the people to repentance and teaching them God's law. Later, Nehemiah, a trusted official in the Persian court, returned to rebuild Jerusalem's broken walls. He inspired the people to work together, and despite threats and challenges, the walls were completed in just 52 days. This period of rebuilding was not just about restoring structures. It was about renewing faith, recommitting to God's covenant, and trusting in His plan for the future. Chapter 63. Renewing their faith. With the temple and walls rebuilt, it was time for Israel to renew their covenant with God. Under the leadership of Ezra and Nehemiah, the people gathered in Jerusalem. Ezra, the scribe, stood on a high platform and opened the book of the law of Moses. As he read, the people stood and listened. Some wept as they realized how far they had strayed from God's commands. Nehemiah and the Levites explained the meaning of the words, helping everyone understand. The people repented and said, "We will follow God's ways." To seal their commitment, they signed a written covenant. They vowed to honor the Sabbath, avoid intermarrying with foreign nations, and support the temple with their tithes and offerings. This was more than a simple promise. It was a heartfelt return to God's covenant. Though they had stumbled before, they were now determined to walk in obedience. Through their renewal of faith, the people of Israel took an important step in rebuilding their relationship with God. They knew that following his commands would guide them into a hopeful future. Chapter 64. Looking Forward. With the people's faith renewed and the temple restored, a new chapter began for Israel. While the past was filled with struggles, disobedience, and exile, now there was a sense of hope for the future. The prophets Haggai, Zechariah, and later Malachi continued to speak God's words, urging the people to remain faithful. They spoke of a time when the Lord would send a Savior, one who would bring peace, justice, and a new covenant. Haggai encouraged the people to rebuild with all their hearts, reminding them that God's glory would fill the new temple. Zechariah shared visions of a coming king who would bring salvation. Malachi warned against complacency, calling the people to honor God fully in their worship and their lives. Through these prophecies, God assured the people that his plan was still unfolding. He had not forgotten his promises to Abraham, Moses, or David. Even though they had stumbled, God's love remained steadfast, and his promise of redemption was firm. The final words of Malachi looked ahead to a day when the Sun of Righteousness would rise with healing in its wings. A messenger would prepare the way, turning hearts back to God and pointing forward to the one who would come. Though the Hebrew Bible's narrative concludes here, the story is far from over. God's people would wait expectantly for the fulfillment of these promises, promises that would ultimately be fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Chapter 65. The Waiting Years. After the final prophecies of Malachi, a long silence fell over Israel. For 4 centuries, no new words from God were heard, no prophets were sent. The people of Israel continued their rituals, celebrated their festivals, and longed for the promises of the past. During this time, the Jewish people faced various rulers and empires. The Greeks and later the Romans controlled their land, shaping their world in profound ways. The priests and scribes carefully preserved the scriptures, ensuring that the words of Moses, the prophets, and the psalmists were not lost. Though God seemed silent, he was still working. His plan was not forgotten. The world was being prepared for the coming of the Messiah. Some remained faithful, waiting and praying. They recited the words of the prophets, hoping for the day when the Savior would come and restore all things. As the Roman Empire brought roads, a common language, and a network of cities, the stage was being set. God's timing was perfect. Though the people could not see it yet, the moment was drawing near when heaven would break its silence, and the greatest promise would be fulfilled.